Oh, hi Spice, how are we doing? Oh, hi Spice. I'm just relaxing with some games after releasing my 4-hour video about revolutions in pop media produced by Leo V. I needed a break after making that behemoth. Yeah, I bet. Have you seen any of those new Lorwyn Eclipsed cards though? What was that? Yeah, are you going to make a video about it? It's just that the set's coming out in a couple of days, so... Hello, spicy people of the internet. I'm Spice8rack, aka Champion of the Weird, and it's time to talk about Lorwyn Eclipsed. This video is brought to you by my patrons and sponsored by Wizards of the Coast, yes, actually, as well as CoolStuffInc.com, where for a limited time you can pre-order Lorwyn Eclipsed and get a fairy token with my face on it and save 5% off your order when you use code SPICE at checkout. After almost 20 years of waiting, Magic the Gathering has finally returned to Lorwyn and Shadowmoor, now united into one like Bosnia-Herzegovina or Ross Rachel. These things are identical and a deeply apt comparison on my part. With our return, of course, comes the set itself, Lorwyn Eclipsed, and 2, the best way to play Magic, the limited format. Here you'll get to experience the widest variety of this set's contributions to art, lore and the mechanical tradition of this game, and whilst I intend to make a full video analysing the set as a whole once I've had time to mull it over, for now I will be delving into how to draft, how to build a sealed deck at the pre-release, find your local one at the link below, and touch on what those archetypes express about this new, changed Lorwyn Shadowmoor. Or should I say, Mull Drifter it over. That needed to come a lot earlier, didn't it? White-blue. Merfolk. In Lorwyn Eclipsed there are 5 main creature types to draft, one of whom is the kind, wise Merrow, or the cutthroat in more ways than one Merrow, depending on if you're standing in the shade or not. Convoke makes an appearance in this set, centered mainly in white and blue, asking you to develop a school of Merfolk tokens using cards like Silvergill Mentor to cast kindred removal spells like Wonderwine Farewell, out-tempoing your opponent with a constant torrent of fishy bastards. Many Merfolk too gain benefits to becoming tapped, like Wonderbrine Preacher, which not only can gain you life when you use it to convoke, but also acts as a valuable target for annoying attackers like Gravelgill Scoundrel. I'd also highly recommend looking to pick up Tributary Volta in conjunction with the Scoundrel for some seriously beefy, unblockable attacks as early as turn 3. The Merrow of Lorwyn Shadowmoor are the plane's most mercantile people, and thus their mechanical ability to create value through game actions that don't require attacking suits them well. To pick out just one piece in particular, I enjoy the narrative of Julie Dinnan's Pestered Wellguard, where her becoming tapped through means other than attacking suggests the literal motion of her batting away the fairy that's chosen to wring out her hair while she tries to keep watch over the wetlands around her, thus creating the token. Blue-black. Flash Fairies. Speaking of the Fae, whilst there's only limited kindred support for their type found in the rare Sultai legend Maralen Fae Ascendant, their presence is certainly felt in blue and black. Echoing their original design from the Lorwyn and Shadowmoor blocks, as well as later fairy designs such as Alila Cunning Conqueror, which encourage you to cast spells on your opponent's turn, simple hybrid shapeshifters in Lorwyn Eclipsed like Mischievous Sneakling, easy to cast instant speed threats, can trigger Unwelcome Sprite to help you set up future turns of tricks and pranks, as is the Fae way. Many fairies themselves have flash, such as Glamourmite, a slightly beefier but less versatile Pestamite, which can trigger powerful inbuilt removal engines such as Nightmare Sower, but also can twiddle your merfolks in blue for additional becomes tapped benefits, provided you're into that sort of thing, of course. There's less intrinsic payoffs in this archetype as compared with the others in this list, which may make it appear weaker on first blush, until you remember that instant speed shenanigans are inherently advantageous regardless of whether or not you have Voracious Tome Skimmer drawing you cards each time you hex your opponent mid-combat. That being said, you should absolutely be trying to assemble these value engines. The Fae of Lorwyn Shadowmoor are also less affected by the effects of... Come on, Spice, you can write a script. I've seen you do it before, for goodness sake. are less impacted by the transition between the states of the plane, differing only in appearance and in the cruelty of their pranks rather than shifting between two forms of memories and culture as all other native beings do, very much reflecting the world around them back outward. It may not fit into this instant speed synergy, but I can't resist myself from highlighting Omar Ryan's gorgeous work in Dream Caesar. The miasma of colour shifting between fluid and sharp spikes as this fairy both steals the giant's dreams whilst getting caught in shards of magic and causing blight to your board as a result. The way that the beard expands towards the crown of the sleeping behemoth, becoming the gnarled trees of Shadowmoor as it does so, is the kind of haunting touch which I've come to expect and crave in Ryan's work. It was me giving Omar a little kiss on the forehead. Black-red. Goblins. Movie goblins. Spooky goblins. Spreading diseases amongst themselves. Why is no one wearing a condom? The boggarts of Lorwyn Shadowmoor are pranksters like the Fairies, although their pursuit of such activities falls less into cruelty and annoyance for the sake of it, and more so in pursuit of new experiences. Either to bring back and share with their aunties as in Lorwyn, or to hoard for themselves and fiercely defend as in Shadowmoor. In Draft, they care about Blight, a new mechanic which has you put -1/-1 counters on your own creatures, usually for some additional benefit. Bog Slithers embrace Blight to keep a very powerful removal spell cheap, whereas Sourbread anti-Blights to generate additional Goblin tokens. On the surface, whilst this seems apt considering the Boggart's propensity for embracing self-destructive new experiences, from a gameplay perspective, this sucks and is bad. A correct assessment. Well done, you're a very good Magic player. However, this self-sabotage in conjunction with cards like Heirloom Auntie can see tokens traded for growing power and surveil triggers. Some goblins are also begging to die, such as this tosser. Mud Button Curse Tosser, that is. Oh, you can't laugh at your own awful jokes. Who doubles up both as an early aggressive threat and a low power removal spell the second it outgrows its usefulness. Cards like Unbury and Gravesifter can return expended gobbos back to hand, the latter being a goblin as well as every other creature type, only for you to feed them into the muck pile once again, whilst payoffs such as Lasting Tarfire, Boggart Mischief and Boggart Cursecrafter suck your opponent dry. Or, if you're extra lucky, a Shadow Urchin can generate card advantage for you. Of course, whilst feeding Vile Boggart and the such into the Blight machine is a perfectly good strategy, larger creatures too can actually benefit from being drowned in muck. Gnarlbark Elm is a visual standout for me in both how its art and flavour text grab you by the collar to yell, "Put me in your goblin deck, you handsome fool." Canavagia's composition harkens back to the original Lorwyn blocks, showcasing the direct interaction between creature types as both world building which demonstrates the relationship between these two disparate kin, but also as mechanical shorthand to display synergy. In my head at least, this scene is the spiritual successor to Nib and Grick from those original sets. White and Green. Kithkin. It should come as no surprise that Lorwyn's most iconic contribution to Magic's pantheon of creature types, the Kithkin, return as one of the plane's 5 telegraphed draftable kindred archetypes. Yes, I know, Kithkin were in the game before Lorwyn. Lorwyn was the place that actually fleshed them out as a creature type though. You're very, very smart, and you would beat me on actually, but just let me get on with the video! Both their Lorwyn and Shadowmoor selves prioritise community and collectivity over individualism. Although whilst the former sees welcoming other species into their clachans as part and parcel of their ideology, the latter have turned inward to their own dunes, especially after the Phyrexian invasion, and seek only their own kind to join ranks with. As you can imagine, flooding the board with Kithkin tokens, such as with the frankly hideous Kithkeeper, and pumping them up with a timid shield bearer is certainly a solid game plan. However, many Kithkin cards care about visitors coming to tea, from the pumped up Kinspale Aspirant and Bristlebane Outrider, to the utility of Wary Farmer, the card draw attached to Thoughtweft Charge, or even the life gain of the Elvish Virulent Emissary, all easily and repeatedly triggered with the Kithkin enchantment of Clochan Festival, which can itself be found thanks to Eclipsed Kithkin's Enters effect due to its kindred type. They also make great use of the Behold and Exile mechanic, with their specific rare not only pumping your board up, but also granting multiple potential Enters effects both when you cast the creature and when it's removed and that which it supplanted returns. You'll want to be stuffing your deck with creatures and ways to generate tokens for Enters value whilst slowly eclipsing the board state of your rival. This, to me, speaks to both sides of Kithkin kind. Triggering on new beings entering their space as they both react with glee and boons, as well as suspicion and drawn blades, depending on the cycle of the planes. Whilst it's not a key component of their draft archetype, I can't leave Ron Spencer's Keep Out unremarked upon. I adore the way this set's artwork is effortless in recapturing the original Lorwyn and Shadowmoor's tone, and I'll be sure to gush more about it in my full video. Red-Blue Elementals. Maybe the most wide-ranging creature type on this list, Lorwyn Shadowmoor's Elementals are a mixture of abstract beasts, cacophonies of symbolism and nature, essentially what a zoo would look like in a world designed by a poet and an 8-year-old whose favourite animal is the duck-billed platypus. But also the humanoid Flamekin and Rhymekin, who have largely replaced the smoking cinders of Shadowmoor's past with frosty flames and shards of ice. Thus far, I have shied away from suggesting the most obvious path for deck construction in Limited. You don't need me to tell you that Thoughtweft Lieutenant or Brigid Clockhand's Heart are good cards for the Kithkin deck. But Twin Flame Traveler's Panharmonicon on steroid style effect for other elementals is simply too absurd not to note. Many elementals in this set trigger off of spells of mana value 4 or greater. Casting a Flamekin Guildweaver with a Tanufel Rhyme Speaker out will net you a card and a treasure, but with Johnny Storm and Iceman here, you'll be doubling that, and every other triggered effect from your other elementals, which, yes, includes the mythic rare incarnations, as if they weren't already honking good enough in Limited. You'll likely want to set up for big turns with ramps such as Flamebraider and Soulbright Seeker, along with triggerable creatures like Cool Wrath Mystic and Enraged Flamecaster, before dropping a truly terrifying big spell and taking everyone's lunch money. It's a nice change of pace for Izzet to care about big spells, usually the purview of green and red, and speaks to the great explosive whims of Lorwyn Shadowmoor's Elementals, both in the Flamekin, Rhymekin and Cinder's propensity for remarkable detonations, but also in their kinship with the vast bestial elementals which stalk the skies, seas and streets of their world. Sunderflock may be my favourite of this set's designs for said elementals. Not only is it a phenomenal and terrifying finisher in a Izzet elemental deck, but its fluffy yellow young plainly honking behind it as its presence has wrought a terrible storm upon the poor fisherman beneath is some delicious absurdity. Black-green Elves. Our final creature type and last obvious archetype are Elves. Situated in Golgari colours, these haughty tree judges, cruel eugenicists in Lorwyn, holier-than-thou forest protectors in Shadowmoor, have lost much of their standing since the Phyrexian invasion, and their mechanics reflect that. Caring deeply about elves struck down and filling your graveyard, a Dawn's Light Archer exists to block and die to an attacking flying foe, only to fuel the draining effect of Dawnhand Eulogist, as does Scarblade Scout's Enters effect, which can also pump Llywyn's Worm Harvest ability. Oh, I am so excited to be talking about a set that's full of Irish and Welsh words for a change. At last, it's not me mispronouncing things, it's you bastards! You'll want to be attacking aggressively, making trades with combat tricks like Scarblade's Malice to slowly feed Morkant's eyes, until you can flood the board again with elves desperate to reclaim what it is that they've lost. This exploitation or veneration of the dead can be read either way, depending on which side of the moon you find yourself on. Stoic Grove Guide gladly gives herself up to death to be replaced by another who seeks to walk the same path of defending the isolated groves of beauty in Shadowmoor, whereas Morkant's Loyalist refuses to let elvenkind die, its flavor text a desperate callback to the species' erstwhile supremacy. Gloom Ripper is obviously a must-take card if you fall into this archetype, but I want to talk about how still this art is. There is motion in this elf's hair alone. Her face is devoid of emotion. The tree branches hang without breeze in the air. Her left arm is held at her side in a fully neutral pose. It has all the air of a royal portrait, one which the subject would have had to sit for hours to take, if not for the 4 knives flying towards us, so close already that they've passed the bounds of the card's frame. Annie's Steg has captured this serene, surreal sight, one that feels like we've only encountered because we've looked over our shoulder at the sound of a leaf rustling. There's a masterful, terrible piece here. It's sodding lush. Tema. Lorwyn is vivid. Here is where I got into some trouble making this video. The previous section's archetypes are clear, even when there's not an obvious signpost rare like Grub's Command telling you what your deck should be, and yes, the answer is always the Goblin one. There are 4 colour pairs left without as clear a direction: red-green, green-blue, red-white, and white-black. Each time I tried to work out what made one unique in comparison to the others, I was stumped and had to return to the board, until I realised there aren't 10 archetypes. There are 8. Or more specifically, there are 10 archetypes, but 4 of them share the same space. The previous 6 archetypes are clearly surrounding and supporting the plane's most iconic creatures, but the latter 2 are representative of the dual plane as a whole. Centered in green and leaning either red or blue, the Vivid archetype asks you to jam as many colours of cards as you can into construction. Vivid is a new mechanic, somewhat the opposite of Devotion, which checks the variety of colours in the permanents you control and grants you scaling boons. Wildvine Pummeler can be a 6/5 for as little as 2 mana, provided you control permanents in all of Magic's 5 colours, which can easily be achieved with only a handful of the set's common shapeshifters, or with a single tap of Tam, the Gorgon Strixhaven student whose accidental visit to the plane spurred its narrative into action. Your red-green cards mana fix with Dorks and Treasure, where your blue-green cards have the greatest payoffs for this strategy. The world's changelings are a must pick up too, both as flexible multicolour cards, but also producing fixings, such as with Changeling Wavefinder. The variety of creatures you're likely to run as a result of this strategy, along with the amount of changelings you're liable to pick up, will also let you snag some otherwise perplexing inclusions in this set. Pummeler for Hire, for example, is one of only 2 giant synergy pieces in Lorwyn Eclipsed, but a vibrant deck chock full of colour-fixing changelings will likely benefit from him more than a deck trying to force red-green giants. Nabbing cards which produce treasures like Reckless Ransacking will be just as important as massive bombs like Prisma Basher, which, if triggered to its maximum, all but guarantees a game win. Obviously, as well, the Tema colours may see you snagging some elementals in red and blue, and Squawk Roaster's soft, sizzling artwork where a nest of bird heads poke up through smoke like jets of flame is a delightfully creative one. Playing this archetype does not guarantee you to play only cards featuring Lorwyn in their artwork, but that's also not the point of the set. One where duality isn't positioned as a binary of positive and negative, but as 2 distinct halves of a whole. Which of course brings us on to that other half. Mardu. Shadowmoor is blighted. Centered in white and leaning either red or black, Shadowmoor's archetype sees you adding and removing counters from huge threats for great benefits. Giants are a big part of this strategy and is likely the only other home for Bold We're Aggressor in Limited, but this is due to their propensity in the set for entering with -1/-1 counters on them to be removed for additional effects, much as we discussed in the Goblin section. This is representative of the name dreams experienced by the giants of this realm, where they slumber for ages, sometimes even sleeping through a transformation from one side of the plane and back again. As they shake off this slumber, they become more powerful and sure of themselves, ready to earn the titles they have found themselves dreaming of. Of course, it's not just giants that fit into this archetype. At its most simple, a card like Moonlit Lamenter can grow from a 1/4 to a 2/5 and draw you cards, provided you could pay the cost and have a way to put further counters on it via the Blight mechanic. Rather than the Goblin archetype killing off and recycling critters to eke out benefits, this strategy seeks instead to burden high toughness creatures who can take the hit with the additional cost of removal like Pyrrhic Strike, only to then use those counters to fuel massive threats like the aforementioned Gnarlbark Elm, adding value upon value but in a fittingly grinding way. Not unlike Lorwyn's Vivid, mana fixing is a must here should you lean fully Mardu rather than Boros or Orzhov. But the benefits of pairing Gut Splitter Gang with Hovel Hurler are too juicy to not be tempted by the full splash. It may, like Shadowmoor is to Lorwyn, be harder and less forgiving an archetype to pull off, but the ceiling of value represented by this constant recycling of adverse effects, letting you recur cards like Evershrike's Gift to your doubled benefit, and even reversing the fortunes of an opponent who seeks to force you to blight yourself with removal like Blight Rot, is tempting beyond belief. There are, of course, other strategies to try and break into. 5-color good stuff will always be a shimmer in the eye of a limited player, and I'm sure that someone will open Duran Besieged by Time and hunt feverishly for Bark of Duran, Sapling Nursery, and Spry and Mighty to relive the Abzan Treefolk limited strategy of yesteryears, and I do wish them all the best, hopeless romantics that they are. For now though, I'm off to make as many Goblin decks as I'll be allowed to, and bend the ear off of any player who will listen to my screeds on the crimes of elf kind. What are you hoping to build in Lorwyn Eclipsed, and what are your opinions on the set as a whole? As I said, I'm planning on making a bigger video about Lorwyn Eclipsed in the coming months, so this will be a great opportunity to see if all of those people begging me to break my videos down into standalone sections are actually going to show up to watch more, or if I'm entirely correct to keep spending fiscal quarters making rambling messes of indeterminate length for my own amusement. Either way, the next one I'm sure will be full of far more swearing. Do not fear the night, it brings comfort to those who are beset by a darkness that no sun alone can rupture. And as always, stay spicy.